we must hang together or we will surely hang alone. Hey, what's going on, everybody? And I figured since we are fastly approaching the next hearing pertaining to the car crash that, I would like to get some information out to the public before we move into the car crash. So in order for you guys to get a good understanding of what's going on with the car crash, I just want to quickly bring you up to speed in case you forgot or in case you are just getting here. So first and foremost, our initial hearing scheduled in front of Megan Bilik DeFazio, she had recused herself immediately, stating that her husband coached a basketball team in which her daughter and the defendant's sister played on. So she recused herself from the gate. That put us in front of Judge Mears. Now, on the day that we went in front of Judge Mears, he delayed the decision on a plea after we were given the opportunity to address the courts and explain to them, our concerns with how things were moving. So then we resumed later, and in between him delaying the plea and the next hearing, he did encourage the defense attorney and the prosecutor to work on a plea agreement in which the victims in this crime were satisfied. And what they want to do is they want to drop the felony and they want to give a little bit of house arrest and a suspended license. And with the life-changing injuries that took place during this crime, that's not an option for the victim. So once we got to the next hearing, now I do want to point out that there was a recusal mentioned at this hearing where it was delayed by the defense attorney, and he eventually did put that recusal in. Now this hearing took place on, I believe it was April 4th. So the recusal went in, I believe, April 9th. And essentially what the recusal was is the defense attorney didn't like that the judge listened to the victims, not just listened, but heard the victims. And then he decided that he needed a little bit more information in order for him to, be able to accept any sort of plea agreement. And the defense didn't want that because they didn't want the judge to see that no crash investigator was called to the scene, that an incident report wasn't written until November for an accident that occurred in July of 2024. There's a lot of things that the defense attorney and the prosecutor do not want the judge to see. So nonetheless, they tried for a recusal, and the judge denied. He said that he stood firm on his right as a judge to oversee these proceedings and to make sure that, the victims are heard and that all the information is put on the table. So when we got to the next hearing, right, the judge rejected the plea deal. So that was, on April 4th, where he had rejected the plea deal. And then that's when we get into another recusal. This is Judge Mears right here, defense attorney Charles Porter Jr., and, Nichole Ziccarelli, DA 3:30 a.m. But one thing I want to say, there was a lot of people that were a little upset that Judge Mears recused himself, and that, a lot of people immediately jump to, oh, he's part of the system, he's on the bad guys team. And I have to say, I disagree, and I will tell you why. Because I was in the courtroom when Mr. Porter made the judge aware that he would be submitting a second recusal, and the judge laughed. I mean, I don't know if he noticed that he did, but as the defense attorney and the prosecutor were walking away from the sidebar, he chuckled because what he had just been told, which I didn't find out till later on once the recusals were released, it was a joke. And he even took it upon himself, and I really, Judge Mears, if you happen to see this, I appreciate you, sir, because he even made mention in his, acceptance of recusal in point number 3, that the defense counsel never explained why he did not raise in his original motion for recusal, dated April 9th, 2025, the issue regarding the attorney's contact with the undersigned's law clerk. Let me go back to that. On April 4th. Now, what the judge is essentially saying here is that you filed a motion for recusal prior to this one, and the incident that you're claiming happened in this one after your first failed attempt to recuse me, Why didn't you raise that issue then? And what the issue essentially is that what they put in the second motion for recusal to get the judge out of the way, clearly it's judge shopping, was they said that his law clerk, after the previous hearing, came out into the hallway and told the defense attorney essentially that he could never win the case, and told the prosecutor essentially that they should have never offered the plea. Now, I find it hard to believe that a law clerk, who, mind you, to my knowledge, a majority, if not every time, they are lawyers, right? I would assume really good ones if judges are putting them as their law clerks. So do we really believe that this law clerk for this judge immediately ran into the hallway after the hearing and started talking to the defense and the prosecutor? Or is it more likely that after they tried to get the judge out of the way, who showed that he was going to, he was going to serve accountability, he was going to do it transparently, is it more likely that somebody got paid to take a dive to maybe say something happened that really didn't happen so they could, shift the pieces on the board to get them where they want them? I mean, you guys be the judge of that. That's what it looks like to me. So let's jump into who's our new judge, because this is where it gets, even more interesting, right? So I just want to point out that our new judge is Nichole Stewart. Now, here's what I find odd is that Nichole Stewart is moving from family court to criminal court, which is a big shift for a judge. Yet I can't find an article anywhere, not in the nowhere, that's speaking about we are rearranging our judges. But what I did find was in this article about the state Senate signs off on Westmoreland Register of Wills and a judge. This was the article where it talked about Judge Smizzy, I think his name is, and this gentleman right here who, luckily the taxpayer showed up and voted because he had no experience for the job that he was trying to take. And in fact, the person that he was going to take it from who actually won, she had a ton of experience. She actually had taken on the office when it was just in shambles and brought it back to life. So I'm happy that she won. But this is the only mention that we can find where it talks about President Judge Christopher Feliciani, who has spent 13 years here in criminal cases, will shift to the civil division later this month, and Judge Mike Stewart will transfer from the family court division to hear criminal cases. So that's the notice that the people got, that this judge was transferring from family to criminal, which I think is, that's not very open with the people about, what's going on in the court system. But why does this matter? Why does this matter to me? Well, I'll tell you why. Because Judge Nichole Stewart is part of a law firm. I believe his father may have started this. Stewart, McCardle, Soares, Whalen, Farrell, Finoli, and Kavanaugh. And I'll tell you, the only two names that I'm interested in are Stewart and Whalen. So Whalen is clearly a partner in the Stewart law firm that is attached to Judge Nichole Stewart. I think we can all agree on that. Okay, so let's jump into this obituary then. Now that we've discussed the Stewart and the Whalen connection here, let's jump into this obituary. So this is for Nicholas Skeesis, right? And we just want to come, we want to come here and their children, right? So this is the children of Nicholas Skeesis and Fifi Skeesis. And it's Dr. Helen S. Dolly Whalen and husband David T. Whalen. And then they have a son, Jacob N. Skeesis, and his wife, Rolla Strategos Skeesis. Then we have Catherine S. Lobaugh and Constance M. Skeesis. So Lobaugh is D.A. Ziccarelli's maiden name, and then it goes on to talk about her grandchildren, and that's where we see Christopher Whalen and Nicole Lobaugh, who, remember, is Nichole Ziccarelli. So Christopher Whalen is Nichole Ziccarelli's cousin. The question is Christopher Whalen related to the Whalen who is associated with Judge Stewart's law firm. Because here's the thing, Nichole Ziccarelli has a lot to lose in what's going on with my family because she has been a primary issue, right? She is the puppet master within the district attorney's office, within the county detectives bureau. She has a lot to lose, so it would benefit her to get my case in front of a judge that she has some sort of connection to, right? But let's talk about who is Christopher Whalen, because then it gets even more interesting. So Christopher Whalen was put on leave. I believe that this may be him, right? But Christopher Whalen, yeah, that's him. James C. Whalen, who goes by Christopher Whalen. And we'll get into why he goes by Christopher Whalen, right? But he ended up coming to work at Peters Township, and they come to find out that in 1999, he had a relationship with a student who was 14 at the time that became physical, and then in 2000 became sexual, according to an arbitrator's report. This is Nichole Ziccarelli's cousin. And I mean, we have plenty of articles written about this gentleman. I mean, this is Nichole Ziccarelli's cousin. He does not go by James. He goes by Christopher. This is why, because he got caught sexually assaulting a child. So why is that so interesting? Well, I'll tell you why it's interesting. Here's the actual excerpt from, the list of teachers that they keep and what they did wrong. And here it is, plain as day. The educator pursued and maintained a romantic and sexually intimate relationship with the student over approximately 2-year time period, starting when the student was 14. The educator also accessed pornography on high school issued computers. And I mean, here he is, James C. Whalen, goes by Chris Whalen. This was in 2016. He had his license revoked. And then he tried to go to Peters Township to teach. He's a mathematics teacher, 7 through 12. I mean, so Nichole Ziccarelli has a direct tie to Christopher Whalen. That's her cousin, James C. Whalen. And what I'm curious is are those Whalens related to the Whalens that are attached to Judge Stewart's law firm? Because if that be the case, then it would look to me as though they did not really publicly announce the shift from Judge Stewart to family court to criminal court. Mind you, this shift happened while my family's case is being heard in this court. And then through just a little bit of, research and digging and people calling and letting me know these different relationships between people, I think that I have found a pretty reasonable concern here that Nichole Ziccarelli has a tie to Whalen, who is a partner of the judge's law firm, who is now seeing my family's case. And I understand maybe he's not really tied to but it's a connection, and it's a connection that's too close. It's a personal connection, and it makes me uncomfortable that this is happening in the manner that it is, especially when we were with a judge, that would be Scott Mears, who was dedicated to justice. He was dedicated to transparency. He was dedicated to truth. He was dedicated to the Constitution. It showed in his actions and the way he carried himself throughout his short time overseeing this case. So who is this guy, right? I mean, I know that we're going from my case and we're kind of shifting into some other things, but it's so intertwined with each other. It's really hard not to. So this, and I put here in my notes that it's telling that the obituary, he now goes by Christopher instead of James, likely a choice made after his professional reprimand as a teacher. But it raises a deeper question. Nicole, does your leniency towards those who prey on children stem from personal bias or family ties to someone with a history of predatory behavior? Your cousin is a child predator. And then we have this gentleman right here who is Jonathan Kessler. And let's talk about who Jonathan Kessler is real quick. So here was a post from July 12, 2024 from the Pennsylvania arrest warrants page on Facebook. Meet PA State Constable Jonathan Kessler from Westmoreland County. You may ask yourself, why is he wearing women's underwear, as we also did? This is one of the photos sent to attempt to meet up with a child to have sex and caught by 814 predator hunters. I could go to jail if we do this. And he wants to bring a bra and panty set to a 15-year-old as a gift for her. Like, I can't, it's hard to even read this stuff, but Nichole Ziccarelli has known about this child predator for a long time now, yet she does absolutely nothing. Why? Because DA 3:30 a.m. is too busy out there totaling county vehicles. 33,000 in repairs. If my memory serves me right, I think the car, the SUV she wrecked was only valued at, what, about $35,000? You totaled it. There's no repairs to be made to a total vehicle. You just take it to the junkyard, you get a new one. But mind you, there was all kinds of discrepancies with even the way that this entire accident was reported. So I know that we just covered a lot of ground, but essentially what the issue is that Nichole Ziccarelli, I believe, with the information that's been given to me and what's in front of me, that she has a direct familial relationship to the Whalens. I believe those Whalens are, in fact, connected to the Whalens that are partners in the law firm that Judge Michael Stewart, who is now overseeing my case after the third recusal on the case. Second judge, 3 recusals total. Now we're at Michael Stewart. Again, I think that we are now at the point in Westmoreland County with this case that my son was a victim of. See, don't forget that, because a lot of people like to play like I don't have a right to be involved in this case. But at the end of the day, my 13-month-old son was subjected to a 90-mile-an-hour car crash because of the ignorance and stupidity of somebody that is well known to the local police department and heavily protected. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm going to keep putting you people on Front Street until you decide to stop abusing my family and give them justice. And then and only then will this type of stuff maybe stop. I'm going to be watching you guys from now till the foreseeable future. I don't plan on, getting the result that I need from my family and then just dropping off the face of the earth. Because what you guys have shown me, and my community has actually reinforced in me, is that you guys are doing whatever you want to do because nobody is watching you. The Trib is not reporting accurately on what's going on. I mean, the legacy media, at my age, 35, being a millennial, I really never had much faith in legacy media, but I am happy to see that a lot of my predecessors are starting to jump on board with the belief that it's all controlled, scripted propaganda. I mean, even with my recent unlawful arrest, the July 27th arrest, and then the charges filed afterwards on August, I think it was 13th, for an incident that happened on July 17th. I mean, even the way those articles were written, they like to put extra emphasis on the fact that I use profanity because they know that that's going to ruffle a lot of feathers. And what they fail to put in their article is that he has every right to use profanity if that's what he chooses to use. And I assure anyone that's been following me from the beginning, anybody who knows me personally or that I've crossed paths with, you know that I am not out there just talking like a sailor everywhere I go. But in certain situations where emotions are high and there's wrong happening, sometimes I can get a little bit colorful with my choice of words, as well as my tone starts to shift to a more aggressive, stand my ground tone. I talk to people the way they need to be spoken to, which is dictated by how they're behaving. If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and you're representing the people and you're, justice is happening, then you're not going to get much profanity out of me. Actually, more than likely, I know, because I do acknowledge the good, you're probably going to get a lot of compliments from me. I mean, similar to some of the good things that I had to say about Judge Mears. I'm not mad at Judge Mears because he, got put in the position he got put in. What are you going to do? I understand the dilemma of wanting to do the right thing, but everybody around you is not on the same page. It's difficult. It's hard. There's a lot of sacrifice that comes with doing the next right thing for the next right reason. But, that's integrity. And that's what's supposed to separate us from everybody else, is we're supposed to have a little bit of integrity here. You guys don't have to like what's happening, right? You can be upset, Nicole, that there's pedophiles coming into Westmoreland County and trying to meet up with kids. You may not want those statistics on your books, but the public deserves the truth. And it's the same thing with North Huntington Police. You may not want all the meth and the assaults and things on the books and the child molesters and all the other garbage, but the people deserve to know what is lurking around them in their community. We're still waiting to hear some sort of statement on the senior citizen who got jumped at the McDonald's parking lot. I recently found out that there was some sort of police call made from, I believe it was Hillcrest Intermediate, because there was a child who had some kind of facial injury. What happened? That's the issue. If you want to get down to the root issue, what causes people to go down these rabbit holes of conspiracy? That's what you guys want to call these conspiracy theories, all these other, buzzwords that you guys use to describe people who are inquisitive. But this is what happens when you don't give us honest, transparent information. What choice do we have but to try to figure it out with the little information that we do have? So if you guys want to end the speculation, if you guys want to start to mend the bridge to trust between the system and the people, then I would suggest a little bit of transparency, a lot of accountability, and a full understanding that you derive all your authority, all of your power from the sovereignty of the American people. You guys have only been allowed to do what you've been doing because the American people have allowed you to do it. And as we have seen over the last year and what I have brought to the people, we are seeing a shift where the people are starting to go, that don't sound right. You know what? I'm calling bullshit. That's what I'm calling on it. And the more the people call bullshit, the more the people demand honesty, transparency, and accountability, the more we will get, because they will have no choice but to give it to us. Believe that. They want you to believe that you have no power. They want you to believe that you are weak, that you cannot do anything without Big Brother. And I'm telling you guys, that's the lie. There's nobody coming to save the American people. There's not a president we can elect. There is not a judge we can appoint. There's nobody. The agencies aren't coming. We are the agency. We, the people, are the most powerful agency in the land. And we must enforce our will on those that we pick to serve us. They don't get to dictate how much time we get to speak on serious matters during public comments of the town square. They don't get to arrest us without warrants or probable cause or issuing authority involvement and take us into custodial custody and process us. They don't get to do that. They don't get to give our land away for 116 years at $1 a year lease. Anything that's happening, right? If you're sitting there and some of this is resonating with you and you're reflecting on some times where some shit happened that you knew was wrong, but it happened anyway, I want you to go back and look at those times, and I want you to tell me how many people stood up and said no. How many people assembled in protest? Because you can take to the internet and you can type all day long and you can put your thoughts and your feelings into the atmosphere, and you may be doing a heck of a job rounding up people digitally. But if we can't manifest that into physical pushback, because that's what it's about. I mean, since the formation of this country, you have to understand something. Not everybody in the colonies wanted to secede from King George III. It was a minority said, this is wrong. We don't want to do this anymore. This is hot garbage. And newsflash, it wasn't a bunch of older people. It was the young, right? I think the average age of the founder was about 44 years old. I consider that young still. Some of them were as young as 19. But they saw what needed to be done. They saw the injustices. They saw the oppression. And they said, this does not align with our belief system. This doesn't align with our teachings. And we need to get away from this, taxation without representation. You're going to keep taking our tax money, creating new taxes, and then you're not going to do what we need you to do. Now, at that point in time, with the king, he had no obligation to do anything, right? But what he wanted to do. So you have this small group within the colonies that says enough is enough, and they start to, make plans, and they meet and they assemble, and they're doing all of these things to try to get organized so that they can turn around and tell the king, hey, king, no more. Now, why would anybody in the colonies be against wanting to get away from the king? Well, I'll tell you why. Because they were benefiting from the king being in power. I mean, the king was all the way over there. You think that there weren't people in the colonies acting like, Beverly, acting like Bob Bossart or Brian Carlton? You think those people didn't exist in the colonies? The ones that were running around slandering the founders and calling them names and saying they were criminals and, they just don't understand. No, they had that too. But thank God that it did not deter them from doing what needed to be done. They stayed true to their mission. They stayed true to their belief system. And for them, it was a give me liberty or give me death. I believe it was, I'm not going to say who it was. You'll have to look it up. But one of the founders made the comment along the lines of, we must hang together or we will surely hang alone. That's the united we stand, divided we fall. If we stay isolated by ourselves, voicing our opinions and our grievances and pushing back on the man, they're going to hang us individually, no question. And you're seeing that metaphorical hanging with me right now in the unlawful arrest and the retaliatory charges. But when 300 of you show up on the Trib article and you back what I'm doing and you support what I'm doing and you support the mission, that now we're all together, there's less chance they're going to be able to hang me. And the more I get my story out to the public the way I'm doing right now in this video, it's all protection for me because this is a document. I am documenting what is happening as it is happening. So that when they turn around and I raise this issue about Stewart and Whalen at court or to the district attorney and they fail to do anything, well, now we have a record from August 23rd of 2025 that this issue was known about, it was put out to the public, and the court is choosing not to take it seriously, not to look into it. And at that point, should they choose to do that, that's when we need the American people to show up and say, no, this isn't right. Life's not fair, yes. But in this building, we should be getting justice, and this is not justice, and we will not tolerate it. We will not tolerate it. So as far as those families of the ones in the colonies that were against the colonies forming America, we saw that battle continue into the process of making documents for the country. Some people wanted these rights protected. Other ones didn't care much. Some wanted the government to have more power than the people. And they argued, well, that would be the same as a king, just more kings, too many chiefs, not enough Indians. And finally, they got it down pat and they gave us what they gave us with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all these other things. But ever since that, there's still been an attack against those things to erode them. And I truly believe that a lot of this stuff, I think that if I looked at some of these people that are conducting themselves in an anti-American fashion, and if I had the resources and the money to do a little, family tree research into them, I'm talking some like deep dive research, I'd probably find out that a lot of these people come from the bloodlines of those who never wanted America to begin with. Because the way that these commissioners conduct themselves, the way that Nichole Ziccarelli conducts herself, Anthony Lamorelli, all of these people, it is about as anti-American as I have ever witnessed firsthand in my existence in this country. 35 years now, coming up on 36 in September. And we're in a bad place. And it's not necessarily that I'm fearful that I personally am going to see the consequences of continuing on in this direction. But what I am fearful of is that maybe my son will see it. Maybe, should God, bless my son with children and make me a grandfather, I'm pretty certain they're going to see it, because I don't see how this country continues the way it's going for the next, 70 or 100 years without there being a serious conflict between the people and the government. And that's what we want to avoid. That's why we do what we do, because we want to push back and let them know, if you're thinking about trying us, now is not the time. That is what we do. We push back so that they know that we are still strong enough to defend ourselves. But I promise you guys, and like I said, maybe it's not 20 years from now, 50, maybe it's not going to be for 100 years. But should the day ever come that they determine that the American people are too weak to defend themselves, or too ignorant to have the knowledge to even begin to think about defending themselves, that's the day they're coming for all of us. I can promise you that. That's the day they're coming for every single one of us.